The day after the 10th time we set the wedding date, Hugh bypassed me and kissed his adopted sister. He presented scarlet roses to Luna, who was walking down from the stage. "My princess, I will be your exclusive protector for this lifetime." I stood quietly outside the jeering crowd and turned around to leave resolutely. After 5 years of being engaged, my heart finally died at this moment. That night, I took the wedding invitations and jade bracelets that I had prepared at the engagement banquet 5 years ago to find Hugh. "Let's call off the engagement." There was no trace of emotion in my tone. Hugh stared at me with his beautiful eyes for a long time. Then, he leaned back on the sofa slowly, squinting at me and said, "Zoe, what kind of joke are you playing?" I shook my head. "I'm serious." As if to emphasize that this was the result of long consideration, I added, "It's a decision I've thought about for many years." The last ray of sunset shone on the sofa, making Hugh's face look even gloomier. After a while, he nodded, stood up and said indifferently, "Suit yourself. I'm busy. Take your jade bracelet back." I didn't say a word. I walked past him into the study and saw the old wedding invitation. I picked up the jade bracelet we had exchanged, took a deep breath, and got up slowly. Hugh and I had been together for 10 years. We were supposed to get married 5 years ago, but because of Luna's appearance, the wedding date was postponed again and again. Over the past 5 years, I had wanted to end this relationship countless times and then regretted it just as many times. But this time, it was different. From today on, Hugh and I had no relationship whatsoever. After walking out of the study, I was surprised to see Hugh, who had supposedly left. He was standing quietly in the living room as if waiting for me. I walked over, intending to ignore him and leave directly. But Hugh stopped me, frowning at me. "Zoe, if it's because of what happened today, you've got it wrong." Hearing his self-righteous tone, I didn't look up. Was I wrong? This morning he promised Luna that he would be her only protector. Last time, he used his status to put pressure on others for Luna, helping her snatch my chance to perform on stage. The time before that, he kissed Luna in front of me to help her win a game. Were these all misunderstandings? For the first time, I didn't respond to Hugh's high-handed attempt at reconciliation. Over the years, it was always me who swallowed my pride to make peace. Even during every quarrel, as long as he said something, I would obediently come back. But it would never be like that again. We were over. The next day, I went to the dance troupe for training and ran into Luna backstage. She was standing there, gracefully lecturing the new junior sisters. When Luna saw me passing by, she stretched out her hand to stop me, with a provocative look. In the past, I would have listened to Hugh and let her have her way, greeted her obediently, or just walked around her. But now, I slapped her slender arm. Luna probably didn't expect me to do this. She withdrew her arm in pain, walked over and pushed me hard, angrily saying, "Zoe, what's wrong with you? Don't you know who's in front of you?" I steadied myself and said calmly, "I know. The eldest miss of the Hugh family, the darling of our dance troupe." 5 years ago, when Hugh was sponsoring a welfare institute, he met Luna, who was visiting there. Because the company needed good publicity at that time, Hugh directly adopted Luna as his sister and brought her home. But somehow, that bit of good publicity turned into Hugh's unconditional spoiling of her. After that, our wedding was postponed time and time again. Luna's affairs became Hugh's top priority. The first time Hugh stood me up for Luna was, I think, on my birthday. The family driver quietly told me that Hugh planned to propose to me that day. Hugh was a bit of a straight guy. I didn't want to start the second half of my life in an unromantic setting. So I booked the best seat at the Sunset restaurant that day. I was sitting in the center of the beautiful and romantic restaurant, surrounded by flowers and applause, cutting a delicate little cake with a steak knife. A ring was exposed in the sweet air. I was overjoyed. But the next second, Luna arrived. "Brother, I think I have a fever." Seeing Luna, Hugh didn't hesitate to stop the proposal and walked towards her. My smile vanished instantly. The words, "What are you doing?" turned into, "Shall we take her to the hospital together later," when I met his cold eyes. He frowned, stared at the ring as if thinking about something, but still said mercilessly to me, "Zoe, be sensible. Luna is still young. What if the fever leaves sequelae? Perhaps a woman's sixth sense is especially accurate." That day, watching him leave with Luna, I suddenly felt that Hugh didn't belong to me. But no matter how strong my premonition was, I couldn't stop myself from falling for him again and again. From having my heart flutter time and time again and being willing to go through fire and water for love. How many times did Hugh stand me up for Luna? It seemed so many times that I couldn't even remember clearly. At this moment, Luna's shrill voice cut through the whole floor. "You know and you still dare?" I snapped back to reality and interrupted her calmly, "It's none of my business." In the past, Hugh not only protected her but also made me give in to her. My unconditional compliance had inflated Luna's arrogance. She had snatched my chances to perform on stage, my dance costumes, and even my fiancé. I don't want to care about what she snatched in the past. And I don't want to give in to her anymore. I've broken off the engagement with Hugh. She seemed not to understand, staring at me in disbelief. What? In her eyes, I saw shock and a faint hint of delight. After all, the Hugh family was rich and powerful, Hugh was handsome, and he owned a listed company with a promising future. How could anyone be stupid enough to leave him? But I was willing to be this stupid to get a sincere relationship. I didn't answer. Luna noticed my following silence and calmness. Seeing that I didn't seem to be lying, she beamed with joy. "Really? You really left him?" I wasn't stung by the delight in her eyes. I stared at her and said calmly again. "Yes, it's over between him and me. As for you, you don't have to just call him brother anymore." As soon as I finished speaking, Luna immediately took off her dance costume, threw it to the junior sister next to her, and left in a hurry. I knew she was going to find Hugh. The junior sisters looked at me carefully. "Senior sister, are you okay?" I shook my head and forced a smile. "I'm okay. I practiced in the quiet practice room for the whole morning. When I walked back to the backstage, sweating and gasping for breath, a girl I was friendly with at the neighboring table handed me a glass of water. I took it gratefully, thanked her, and saw her muttering while scrolling through her phone. Luna is in a relationship. Why does this guy look so familiar? I froze for a moment and subconsciously took out my phone from my pocket to open Luna's WeChat moments. She had posted a photo of her and Hugh holding hands at the Welfare Institute. Caption: "You and I have walked together for so many years, and finally, we are side by side." It was posted at 12:07. December 7th was the day they got to know each other. I pursed my lips and suddenly didn't feel like wiping the sweat on my forehead. The photo of Hugh wearing a doll costume to celebrate my birthday was blatantly placed on my desk. I reached out, without hesitation, took the photo frame apart, stood up, and walked to the shredder to put the photo in. The shredder slowly shredded the photo into pieces. It was completely gone, without a trace. I walked back to my seat, picked up the water, and took a big gulp. It was not until evening that I dragged my exhausted body out of the dance troupe. The familiar ringtone of my phone rang. I hesitated for half a minute before taking out my phone from my pocket. A sense of loss, accompanied by grievance, hit me. "Hello, Zoe. When will you and Hugh?" "Mom, we've broken off the engagement." I interrupted her. After listening to my story, Mom said, "What on earth are you thinking? You're almost 30 years old. How dare you break off the engagement? Who will marry you now? Besides, this marriage was arranged by me and your Aunt Lorraine together. Now she has Alzheimer's, but we can't go back on our promise. You must go and explain it to your aunt in person." I hung up the phone and walked alone on the street. Among the countless lights in this city, not a single one was lit for me. I thought I would be alone forever. The ringtone rang again. I turned my head, swiped the screen, and said, "Hello, teacher." The teacher's voice came to my ears. "Are you going to the further study class in Italy? If you refuse again, it will be snatched away by Luna." "I'll go. Teacher, don't worry. I won't give up any opportunities given by the dance troupe to her anymore." The teacher nagged for a while, saying that I had finally come to my senses. I smiled bitterly. It wasn't that I had come to my senses. I just understood that I shouldn't give up what belongs to me and I shouldn't force what doesn't. The next day, I asked for leave, planning to sleep in. But I was woken up by the ringtone early in the morning. Hugh coldly scolded me on the other end of the phone. Are you crazy? You really told your family about the broken engagement? Zoe, you're 30 years old. You're not a girl in her 20s like Luna. Can't you think clearly before doing things? My still sleepy mind gradually woke up because of his shouting. Hugh, you like Luna, don't you? There was no response from the other end of the phone for a long time. After a while, as if he had made a decision, he replied, Zoe, my feelings for Luna are just the kind of affection for a sister. You and I are the ones who should get married. I stared at the ceiling and suddenly felt that the man I had loved for 10 years was such a coward. Hugh, the first time you left me for Luna was on my birthday. That day, you decided to marry me, but also decided to abandon me for her. The second time you ignored my feelings for Luna was at the dance troupe gathering when you drank for her. You kissed her to help her win the game and told me it was just a game. The third time you disregarded me for Luna was when you, as an investor, snatched the stage opportunity from me even though you knew I had dreamed of it. Every time I said this, my eyes got redder. Hugh, you like her and you've wronged me. Do you want me to go on? The phone beeped as it was hung up. Hugh couldn't even bring himself to say an apology. This man was really spineless. Not long after this call, Hugh left. He went to Hebei province for business cooperation, and Luna went with him. I didn't want to pay attention to them, but Luna kept posting on her WeChat moments. I couldn't take it anymore and blocked her. The dance troupe, home. My life returned to a simple routine of 2 places. In the past, for Hugh, I had to squeeze time out of my busy schedule to prepare a loving lunch for him. I would make it, pack it, and then go all the way to his company, only to get a few casual remarks that it wasn't as delicious as the takeout Luna ordered. Now, the time saved was enough for me to have many peaceful sleeps. I no more needed to worry about dozing off in the dance troupe, drinking bitter black coffee, or napping on the hard bench. A week later, Hugh came back. He was wearing a black plaid coat, standing tall and straight with his hands in his pockets, blocking my way at the entrance of the dance troupe. Zoe, let's talk. Hugh took me to the Sunset restaurant where he had proposed before. It was still the central position, with flowers, applause, and cello music. The atmosphere was quiet and elegant. He handed me the sliced cake and said in a hoarse voice, I've thought carefully about what you said that day. I can change. I'll be on your side from now on. I put the cake in my mouth and didn't reply. I used to fail to distinguish between family and lover, sister and fiancé. I'll change, Zoe. Can you give me a chance? To be honest, it would be a lie to say that I was not affected at all. So when I met his sincere eyes and saw the diamond ring in the cake, my heart fluttered again. I said slowly, okay. Hugh's tense expression immediately relaxed. But just as he was about to put the ring on me, the familiar ringtone rang out. Hugh subconsciously glanced at me, then slowly turned his phone away from me and dimmed the screen. I saw all these little moves. It was obvious who the caller was. Because I knew that was the special ringtone he set for Luna. Hugh cast a guilty look at me. I lowered my head and spat out the cake I had just eaten. In the past, when he answered Luna's calls in front of me, he would always show a bit of guilt. I would pretend to be magnanimous and say it was okay. Hugh took advantage of my generosity and walked on the edge of my bottom line. This time, he was still the same. I'll take this call, Zoe. Luna must be in big trouble to call me. I neither agreed nor refused. Luna's voice came from the other end of the phone. Brother, I'm so dizzy. I came to the bar to play and was forced to drink a lot. What should I do? I'm so scared. I saw a hint of urgency in Hugh's eyes. Sure enough. He said into the phone, don't be afraid. I'll be right there. Hugh hung up the phone, trying to prove to me with his promise that every word he had just said to me was true and he would do it. He said, Zoe, don't worry. This is the last time I'll care about her. From now on, I'll make it clear to her. I didn't look at him and looked down at the big diamond ring. Not far away, a performance started in the restaurant. Suddenly, several fireworks bloomed in the night sky. The smiles on the faces of every couple in the restaurant grew a bit wider. Only I was alone. Whether it was the proposal 5 years ago or the reconciliation 5 years later, I was left alone here. I received a WeChat message on my phone. I opened it, and every line revealed Luna's smug and triumphant face. Zoe, he still chose me. In the video she sent me, Hugh was firmly standing in front of her, beating up those who forced her to drink. I remembered what Luna said to me when I left the dance troupe this afternoon. He will apologize to you tonight, but don't worry, he will still be on my side. He will only choose me. To be honest, when Hugh apologized to me just now, I did waver in my heart. I thought at that time that if he could really keep his promise, I would give him one last chance. Unfortunately, he still couldn't do it. 2 days later, I went to apply for a visa to go abroad. After getting the formalities done, I took the jade bracelet to the nursing home to visit Aunt Lorraine. I had been there several times. In the previous visits, Aunt Lorraine was not in her right mind and didn't recognize me. Fortunately, this time, she regained her senses and called me Little Zoe. I told her about what had happened recently and the purpose of my visit. Aunt Lorraine stroked the jade bracelet and was silent for a long time. She looked up, a bit sad. When you were little, you two always played together. Hugh always told me that he wanted to marry you. Later, he begged me to make an engagement with your mom. I thought this relationship would bear fruit, but I didn't expect it to waste so many years of your time. I'm sorry, dear. Hugh is also sorry. My eyes turned red and I shook my head. Hugh made me understand what love is like and also that love can't be forced. Aunt, this is my choice. Aunt Lorraine tore up the wedding invitation and gave the jade bracelet back to me, saying, Zoe, I wish you happiness in the future. About 2 weeks later, I got my visa smoothly. I boarded the flight to Italy. I still wore that string of jade bracelets on me. The moment the plane door closed, I couldn't help but raise my phone to take a picture of the sunset at this moment. When I aimed the camera at the window, I caught sight of an unbelievable figure. It was Hugh. The next second, the flight attendant informed us that the weather had changed and asked us to return to the waiting hall. The passengers in the cabin looked at the clear sky and couldn't help complaining and questioning. You're telling me we can't fly in this weather? Are you kidding? Did you make a wrong detection? I even calculated the time to reunite with my wife. So unlucky. I took my backpack and walked towards Hugh under the guidance of the flight attendant. There was a rare hint of panic on his noble face. He opened his arms wide and hugged me tightly, saying slowly, Why didn't you tell me you were going to Italy for further study? I pushed him away and, looking at the passengers who were staring at us in confusion, said expressionlessly, You shouldn't have come. Hugh grabbed my hand and put the ring that wasn't put on that day into my palm. Zoe, I'm here to marry you. Let's go get married right now, okay? Chapter 29. Looking at the ring in my palm and Hugh who was full of regret in front of me, I felt nothing. Hugh, that night, I almost said yes to you. But you couldn't even do what you promised to apologize for and left me again. At that moment, I really gave up. We were together for a whole 10 years. I gave you my most glorious youth and girlhood, but you mocked me for being old. But you forgot that I was less than 20 years old when I was with you. Whether you liked the young or you were really attracted, anyway, I have truly and completely let go of you. After saying that, I put the ring in his hand and turned to leave. In the past, I was always the one waiting for him. This time, it's my turn to leave first. An hour later, I got back on the plane. There was no one on the apron outside the window. The most important person in this story finally disappeared into the vast sea of people. The passengers in the first class cast strange glances at me and then turned their heads back, muttering, This is a rich guy hijacking a plane for love. I closed my eyes and ignored them. After getting off the plane, I breathed in the fresh air and a sense of freedom hit me. My suitcase bumped into a man, and the contents scattered all over the floor. I felt very sorry and decided to treat him to a meal. In the restaurant, he told me his name was Silas. He was dressed in black silk, looking noble. Before leaving, he sent me to the downstairs of my apartment. The courses for further study in Italy were very intense. I studied the language while keeping up with the dance progress. Surprisingly, I never thought of Hugh during this busy time. I saw him again on Christmas Day. Christmas is not far from the Spring Festival in China. Mom called, and Hugh appeared in the video. Mom said, "Hugh said he came to see us on your behalf." I greeted him across the screen and said nothing. Hugh stared at me for several seconds and said slowly, "How have you been?" I was silent for 2 seconds, recalled the experiences of this year, and nodded with a smile. "Very well." After hanging up the phone, I picked up the ingredients I just bought from the supermarket and put them in the fridge. There was a knock on the door. Silas was carrying big and small bags, and a small part of his shoulder was wet from the snow outside. He exhaled a puff of white air and said with a big smile, "Christmas in a foreign country is like New Year. It's not too much for us to celebrate it together, right?" I stepped aside to let him in. He walked familiarly into the kitchen, put down the bags, and poured himself a glass of water. If there was anything unexpected during this year in Italy, Silas was one of them. We met again on the way to the dance troupe after we parted downstairs that day. Coincidentally, he lived very close to my place. We often had meals together and went home together. He taught me Italian and I treated him to dinner. Gradually, we became very familiar with each other. Silas expressed his feelings to me. It was a leisurely small restaurant, different from the Sunset restaurant. The singer was singing a romantic German love song, and the waiter appeared with balloons and a cake. Silas knelt on one knee, holding a necklace, and there were cheers of blessings from the crowd around. His love was passionate and blatant. His words, "I like you, I want to marry you," made my eyes moist. I took the balloons and ate the cake, but I didn't take the necklace. Silas was puzzled and kept asking me for more than a month. I calmly told him about the 10-year relationship with Hugh. Finally, I said, "You've been developing here in Italy for so many years, and I'm going back to China next year. I won't stay for you, and you won't give up everything here for me. For those who have no future, it's better to be friends." After that, Silas seemed to take my words to heart. He didn't pursue me persistently anymore but just said, like a friend, that it was too lonely to eat alone and often came to my place to cook. In the end, I didn't tell Silas when I was going back to China. But unexpectedly, I saw him on the plane. He smiled at me slightly. Maybe living in a different place will have a different flavor? The string in my heart that hadn't fluctuated for a long time rippled. Even more unexpectedly, I saw Hugh, who came to pick me up at the apron. He walked towards me as if nothing had happened and gently reached out to brush the hair on my forehead. But this time, a hand stopped his in midair. Silas's tall figure loomed over me, and he said domineeringly, "What kind of guy do you think you are, daring to pick up my girlfriend at the apron?" Hugh's face darkened, and he gritted his teeth as if he couldn't accept this fact and asked me, "Zoe, is what he said true?" In the few seconds he waited for my answer, he clenched and unclenched his fists. I stepped in front of Silas and gave a firm "hm." Hugh's eyes were red. Without saying a word, he turned and left. Watching his retreating figure, I couldn't help but sigh that time was truly a magical thing. Looking at his back, I felt nothing at all. A warm breath came from the nape of my neck. Silas' clear voice carried a different kind of emotion as he said, "I had to rely on my ex-boyfriend to get my proper status for the first time. Is he that good looking that you can't take your eyes off him?" I playfully punched him. Just reminiscing. The next day, I stood at the entrance of the dance troupe. The sun was shining brightly, and the sky was clear. My teacher and a group of junior sisters were standing at the entrance to welcome me. After a long round of pleasantries, I went back to the familiar backstage. Looking from afar, where the photo frame of Hugh used to be on my desk, there was now a bouquet of flowers. On the card were powerful and flowing words written by Silas, "Everything goes well." A junior sister beside me, as if sensing something, put on a gossipy expression, Oh, you've got something going on right after coming back. I smiled and put the card in the drawer. I met him abroad. The junior sister covered her mouth exaggeratedly. He came back with you? I nodded. Just as my colleagues were about to start gossiping, someone walked in carrying a bouquet of red roses. Miss Chen, someone sent you flowers. I frowned, intending to refuse. But the junior sister grabbed my hand mysteriously. Luna had an accident during a performance on stage last week and got fired. General Manager Hugh didn't protect her. I pushed her hand away, glanced at the red roses, and didn't take them. Throw them away. After the flower delivery person left, the good gossipy atmosphere was ruined. I changed my clothes and started practicing dancing seriously. In the evening, Hugh was standing beside the trash can at the entrance of the dance troupe, playing with that bouquet of red roses. When I passed by, he stopped me, his tone gentle and cautious. To celebrate your return, how about having dinner together? I shook my head to refuse. No, my boyfriend will take me. Hugh, as if he didn't understand, held my hand tightly and wouldn't let go. Zoe, I've cut ties with Luna. I've been reflecting and repenting these days. Can't you just give me one more chance? I pushed his hand away impatiently. I don't like you anymore. Stop pestering me. My word, pestering, seemed to sting Hugh. He asked me in disbelief, Zoe, you said I'm pestering you? I stared at him and said firmly, word by word, yes, you're pestering me. Hugh, these past 2 years, I would occasionally think of you, of the 10 years we were together. I kept asking myself how I managed to hold on during the last 5 years when you were so ambiguous with Luna. Until one day, I got the answer. Your family is prominent, and you're proud, but you were the only one who would lower your head and apologize to me after making a mistake. That preference you gave me once gave me a great sense of security. But that preference you gave me was all for her. At this point, Hugh's eyes became uneasy. I mercilessly exposed his little thoughts and pretense. The person you prefer isn't me, it's Luna. You don't want to admit that you've fallen in love with someone else, that you've changed your heart in this relationship. Hugh, you only think about yourself, but let 2 women waste their energy and youth on you. You're so selfish. Let me guess. You didn't protect Luna because you were afraid I'd make things difficult for her when I came back to the dance troupe, right? Hugh's face turned pale. Finally, I said, by the way, it's Luna who likes red roses, not me. After that, I turned around and left without looking back. Not far away, Silas stood under the street lamp, looking extremely eye-catching. I walked over, hooked my arm in his, shook off the bad mood, and smiled. Let's go. In the car, he buckled my seatbelt for me, handed me my phone, and then got back into the driver's seat. I'm not familiar with places in China. Here are a few restaurants I've researched. You can choose. Silas and I had similar tastes. The restaurants he took me to abroad were always great. On the screen, he had picked 5 restaurants. I didn't look at the others and pointed at the top-ranked Sunset restaurant. This one. I've been there many times. The food is delicious. In the restaurant, I skillfully ordered the dishes I had eaten before and tasted great, and said to Silas with a smile, these are all very delicious. For our first meal back in China, I wish you success in finding a job. In the same luxurious and high-end environment, with the same atmosphere and violin music. 2 years ago, I thought I'd never step into this restaurant again, but now, stepping in again, I felt completely different. This time, I didn't seem so alone. Silas raised his wine glass and clinked it with mine. In the twinkling night, the chandelier shone on his delicate face, making him extremely charming. We agreed to celebrate for you today. My meal? Zoe, my parents will be back next week. Would you like to meet them with me? I smiled and agreed. Okay. After having that heart-to-heart with Hugh, I blocked all his contact information. But on the weekend, he still called me from an unfamiliar number. My mom is ill. She keeps mumbling about you. I hope you can come and see her. I couldn't bear it in my heart but didn't promise, just being vague. After hanging up, I immediately took a taxi to the nursing home. Aunt Lorraine was really seriously ill. Perhaps because of her age, she didn't recognize me at all. I took off the jade bracelet and put it in her hand, saying gently, "I'm Zoe. I've come to see you." Although Aunt Lorraine was confused, she recognized the jade pendant and kept chatting with me. When Hugh came in and saw me, the joy in his eyes was hard to ignore. I stayed with Aunt Lorraine until evening and just managed to lull her to sleep. Silas sent a message saying he was coming to pick me up. I got up and ignored Hugh, walking out the door. He stopped me at the door and handed me the jade bracelet I had left behind. Only then did I remember that I had used the jade bracelet to comfort Aunt Lorraine and left it in her hand. I took the jade bracelet and said, "Thank you." Hugh took a step forward, getting closer to me, and a flash of pain appeared in his eyes. "You still keep the jade bracelet from our engagement. Why won't you forgive me?" A message popped up on my phone saying Silas had arrived. A hint of impatience flashed in my eyes. "Hugh, it's no fun to keep pestering." I thought that after saying this, Hugh would be sensible enough to step aside. But he kept pressing closer, looking at me with bloodshot eyes. "I don't believe it. If you really forgot me, you wouldn't keep the jade bracelet. You're just mad at me, right?" I slapped him hard without mercy and pushed him away. Thousands of emotions flashed through Hugh's eyes: grievance, confusion, uneasiness, and regret. I saw them all but still said clearly and seriously, "I keep it because of Aunt Lorraine, not because of you. I'll say it again, Hugh, we ended long ago. Do you understand?" Hugh's pupils shrank. He wasn't looking at me. He lunged at me and shouted, "Watch out." I reflexively turned my head back, my pupils dilating. A woman rushed out of the adjacent room and pushed me hard down the stairs. I had no time to dodge and instinctively closed my eyes. Suddenly, I was held in someone's arms and spun around. A familiar herbal scent hit me. I opened my eyes. Hugh was under me, and he had hurt his leg. The nurses in the nursing home were panicking and calling 120. I was speechless with a lump of air stuck in my throat. In the hospital, I stood in front of Hugh's hospital bed, my face cold. He was lying on the bed, and his pale lips curved into a smile. "Don't be angry. I just didn't want you to get hurt." The air stuck in my throat made me even more choked. I said ungraciously, "Thank you for saving me. I'll pay the medical bills and hire a nurse to take care of you." He was silent for a while, then stroked his injured leg and looked at me pitifully. "Can you take care of me?" I shook my head and refused, then walked out of the ward. Silas was standing outside the door, playing with his cufflinks. When he saw me come out, he teased, "I thought you'd be nostalgic and agree to him." I walked forward expressionlessly and coldly. "You followed me from the nursing home to the ward door in such a hurry, but you're not worried about someone stealing your girl?" Silas caught up with me and put a piece of chocolate in my hand from his pocket. "I've always respected your decisions. Your thoughts are yours, and my actions are mine. If you really agreed to him today, I'd also respect your choice." I said irritably, "What if he takes this opportunity to play the pity card and try to win me back?" Silas smiled with certainty. "You won't." I was surprised and turned to look at him from the passenger seat. Silas, with his bony fingers on the steering wheel, made a beautiful turn. "If you weren't firm in your stance, I would have won you over in Italy. Why would I need to follow you back to China?" I laughed, and my mood suddenly brightened. Hugh saving me was a favor. His indecision in the relationship was a disaster. Originally, I hated and resented him. Now that he saved me, let's just call it even. Silas' free hand stroked the pads of my fingers gently. "Don't forget, we're meeting my parents this weekend." I nodded happily. Just as I was about to go out on the weekend, the nurse called, her tone anxious, "Miss Zoe, Mr. Hugh has a fever and can't eat anything." "We can't persuade him," I frowned, was silent for 2 seconds, and then said, "Go find the doctor. The doctor won't let him die in the hospital." Silas burst out laughing at the wrong time. I glared at him and hung up the phone. Soon, we drove to a low-key and luxurious manor. I stared at the palace-like villa in front of me for 2 seconds. Why didn't you tell me your family was so rich? Silas was stunned for a moment and then laughed. I thought you knew my last name. Only then did I remember that the richest man in the city had the same last name. I walked into the villa with a nervous heart. But the moment I saw Silas' mom, I immediately relaxed. His mom was very low-key. She greeted me warmly as soon as we met. A beautiful warm jade bracelet lay quietly in my palm. This is all I have at home for now. Keep it first. I'll prepare something better for you when we get engaged. I really enjoyed this meal. The only drawback was that I got another call from the nurse when I went to the toilet. Hugh asked me to come and see him one last time. I was afraid he'd cause more trouble, so I agreed. After the meal, I asked Silas to drive me to the hospital. Before getting out of the car, he grabbed my hand and pulled me into his arms. He held me down and kissed me for a long time until his lips were chapped. Don't promise him anything. I sensed the uneasiness in his tone and kissed him affectionately on the lips. I won't. In the hospital, I sat beside Hugh, waiting quietly for him to speak. He said nothing and just cried silently as he looked at me. I still didn't say anything, just waited for him to finish crying. Hugh was probably tired from crying. With red eyes, he asked me, "Is there really no chance for us?" I regret it, Zoe. I really do. I've thought a lot these days. The person I've always loved is you. Luna was just a whim. I interrupted him, speaking coldly. I don't want to hear this nonsense. I have a boyfriend now. Our relationship is stable, and we're getting married soon. I came because you said this was our last meeting. If you have something to say it all at once. As for the rest, forget it. The word, forget it, was especially hurtful. Hugh looked at me impatiently, his eyes red. He choked back his sobs and blurted out, I don't believe it. You still have our jade bracelet. I sighed, took off the jade bracelet, and looked at it in my hand for a long time. Hugh watched me, his eyes full of intense anticipation. I took a deep breath and smashed the jade bracelet hard on the ground. It shattered into pieces. Hugh roared, Are you crazy? I said calmly, if it gives you the false hope that our relationship can be repaired, I'd rather smash it. Hugh, I won't forget you. But I hope you'll stop bothering me. You wasted 10 years of my life. Now it's time to let me go. I got up and walked out of the ward. Hugh roared behind me. Zoe, you're mine. Why should I let you go? Come back. I didn't look back and closed the door and left. Outside the ward door, there was someone who surprised me. It was Luna. 17. We sat down in the coffee shop across from the hospital. She looked haggard, holding a coffee cup and looking down, saying self-deprecatingly, It's ridiculous, isn't it? I stayed with Hugh for 5 years, and in the end, I got nothing. Zoe, do you think I deserve it? I didn't say anything and looked out of the window. A couple walking their dog was playing with their pet. I said with a smile, What do you think? If they break up, will they keep the dog? Luna's face was ugly. She thought I was insinuating something. I didn't explain. I took a sip of coffee and asked, How have you been? On her ugly face, she forced a smile. Not good. Actually, it's very bad. Before, when Hugh protected me, I thought I had a talent for dancing. But now that he doesn't protect me anymore, I realize that my skills aren't even good enough to be a dance teacher. The couple at the door had walked away. Only Silas' car was parked at the coffee shop entrance. I finished my coffee and said directly, Luna, you were young and got infatuated with an older, handsome, and charming man. I don't blame you. But if you're sensible, just live a good life from now on. Luna looked at me, her eyes red. I got up and left the coffee shop, then opened the door of Silas' car. Who says I won't meet someone better after leaving Hugh? It's never too late to start a new life. 18. A month later, I heard that the share price of Hugh's company had plummeted. The reason was that Luna had compiled all the things about her and Hugh into a PPT and posted it online. Hugh was still recuperating in the hospital, and his company was also acquired by someone taking advantage of the situation. As for Luna, she went back to the welfare home where she used to be and worked there. I didn't care much about what happened next. Because I was getting married. In the Sunset Restaurant, Silas got down on one knee in front of everyone and said, "Zoe, will you marry me?" I threw myself into his arms and said word by word, "I will." This restaurant that I had visited many times finally witnessed my happiness. A week later, Silas and I held a wedding. The scene was grand and even made the news, being called the wedding of the century. Actually, the person who truly wants to marry you can't wait for a single moment.